Hi, it's Brenda Workman. Welcome to my kitchen. So glad that you stopped by. I just happened to think, I just came in from exercise a few minutes ago and I thought, you know what? There may be people that are interested in how I organize my plant-based kitchen, especially since I've been doing this for a while. It's kind of morphed over time. I use a lot of jars. You may have noticed that, glass jars. So I want to show you how I use jars and what kind of jars I use for my pantry, and then what kind of jars and how I use the jars for my refrigerator. So let's get started. So in the pantry, obviously we have dry goods there. So I just over time started putting everything in jars, and I had canning jars on hand because I also can from our backyard garden. But I just found myself beginning to collect more jars. So if I went to a thrift store or Goodwill or something, or maybe a yard sale and they had jars there, especially large jars, I would pick them up, and I got them at good prices. So some of the things that I keep in my pantry, here's some garbanzo beans, and I don't do anything fancy. Some people I'm sure have better labels than I do, but I just put a piece of tape on it and write what it is. But because I have large amounts of some beans and lentils and some other things, I like these big jars for that. So all my beans are in jars, and that way when it starts getting low, then I know that I need to pick some up at the grocery store because I can see it very clearly. Here's a jar of lentils. And so I also have red lentils, and I think maybe one other type of lentils, and I have a lot of lentils, so I had to get a lot of big jars to put my lentils in. People were actually giving me lentils that came from like commodity where they were giving them away and people didn't want them, and so I love lentils, so I appreciate it. I also put grains in jars, so in my pantry I have grains. Here's brown rice, and I also have quinoa and different kinds of rice in jars. So I may have white rice in one. This is brown rice. I also have oats, and I have oat groats in some jars, and I have steel cut oats in some jars, and then I have rolled oats in jars. But again, these things start getting low after a while, and then I write on my grocery list, you need to stop and get some oats because you're almost out. I use rolled oats a lot for recipes. I also put nuts in jars. So my husband happens to like pecans. You may call them pecans depending on where you're from, but he likes those, and so we keep those in the pantry as well. I also have walnuts here that was in the pantry. In the summertime, I do have a tendency to begin moving my nuts and seeds over into the refrigerator because I have found that in warmer temperatures, sometimes they can go rancid, especially if you don't use them real often. So I'm not doing that yet, but I probably will as it gets a little bit warmer this summer. This jar I did get like at a thrift store, so there's just so many things that you can find, glass jars in different places. You don't have to pay a lot of money for it. Here's some unsalted peanuts. I needed that for a few recipes that I was making an Asian salad, and so I have those, and for recipes mostly. I don't snack on them, but I do use them in recipes. So a lot of things I keep in the pantry, dry goods. And by the way, I do keep baking things in jars as well. So it may be all-purpose flour, it may be sugar, cornmeal, things that you would typically bake with. I keep them in jars. Now the only downside to that is that when you go to measure, you can't stick a measuring cup down in these jars. So unless you get something that has a great big opening, you will struggle with that. It doesn't really bother me. I just kind of turn it up and measure it, and I still keep all my things. I even keep my baking soda and my baking powder in jars so that I can see when I'm running low and when I need to buy more. So, and I have everything labeled, and I know exactly where it is. Everything has a place. So one shelf My top shelf has baking things. And by the way, let me mention this. I do use whole wheat flour most of the time, but I'm a strange person. Years ago, I got a grain grinder, and I'll share with you at the end a video that you can watch that shows me using the grain grinder. But I grind my own grain and make my own whole wheat flour. And so I don't typically do that until I'm ready to use it. So I don't usually have it already milled, but I'll do that when I get ready to use it. So I'll share a video with you at the end, so that you can see me grinding my own grain. Again, I'm a strange one. So I also want to share with you what I keep in the refrigerator in jars as well. You might be surprised how you can keep some things fresh in jars in the refrigerator. Before we get to that, let me mention that I do have a plant-based success booklet that's just real basic about how to get started with plant-based eating. If you're interested in that, if you think it's something that would be beneficial to you, it's free, and I'm going to put the link in the description below so you can check that out. You could print it out and hopefully find it very useful. So let's talk about what I keep in the refrigerator. So I use all kinds of size jars in the refrigerator. I actually put fruit like berries in jars. And sometimes I'll put a little piece of paper towel folded up in here and just to kind of help with the moisture. But I find that fruit stays fresh. I don't wash this first. I just stick it down in jars and then use it up. And I think it keeps my fruit fresher by putting it in jars. There again, I can see what I have and what I need. I make fruit salad a lot. And so my husband likes it, and he takes it to work with him in his lunchbox as a side. And so I'll just make a great big bowl up of all kinds. This one happens to have little clementines, and it has apples. I usually always use apples. It has grapes. It has strawberries, blueberries, just a lot of different fruits. And I'll put it in a big bowl, and then I'll put it in a bunch of these little canning jars. And by the way, these little plastic lids, you can get them on Amazon, and I use those for things that I don't necessarily have to seal it tight. I just want to close it up, and I use that in the refrigerator. So yeah, so really good for that type thing. When I make things homemade, which I do a lot, I store them in jars. So this is yogurt made out of tofu. And I have that recipe in some of my videos. You'll want to check that out. And so I put it in a jar. If I had made more than this, I would have just put it in a couple of jars like this. Sometimes I label them as well so that I know right when I open the refrigerator what it is. I've been testing out lately a fruit dip. I want to find a fruit dip. And so I found a recipe, and this one has strawberries blended up in it. So I'm experimenting to see if I like this one because I want to share it soon. So that is also in a jar. So if it's something like a dressing, I may use a jar like this. Now this is wide mouth, and I can use those plastic lids on this. But this happens to be honey mustard that I made. And so that I would keep in the refrigerator in a little jar like that. I make homemade granola, and I typically keep it in the refrigerator, and the reason why I do is because it has peanut butter in it, it has maple syrup in it, and I just feel like it would keep fresher in the refrigerator. So here's a jar, another one. Actually, somebody gave me this one now that I think about it. So this is homemade granola that I keep in the refrigerator as well. So there's that. And then a couple other things. When I'm going out, I could just be going over to a relative's house, and I think I may have coffee while I'm there. Or I've been known, I do this often, I go to a coffee shop to meet someone, and even though they probably have plant milk at the coffee shop, sometimes they just have specialty coffees. And I just want my coffee, and I want my soy milk, and I want my agave. That's what I use in my coffee. So I'll use a jar like this, and I'll put my plant milk in here. And especially like if I'm traveling and I'm going to be having coffee while I'm gone, or I need soy milk for something, I put it in jars like this and just take it with me. So I use these size jars real often, and it's mostly for soy milk when I think I'm going to have coffee while I'm out and about. Now, I don't store everything in these jars. Let's say I have leftovers. I put them in a glass bowl that has a lid. So I use bowls. I just find that I just like the jars because they're just the right size for certain things. Not long ago, I ordered several of these tiny jars from Amazon, and they were actually baby food jars. That's what they're for, is to make your baby's food homemade and store them in these little jars, and these little lids came with it. So I use them, of course, for dressings, and when my husband takes a salad to work and I'm going to put dressing in it, I'll put it in a little jar like this. Or if I'm traveling out of town and I need a dressing for something I'm taking with me, this is perfect. So you may think this is crazy, and everybody's organization has to be different. I understand that. But for me, the jars work well. I started with jars because I'm a canner and I already had jars. And then over time, I thought, you know what, this works really well. I can look in my pantry and I can see what beans I have, and I can see when I'm low on lentils. I can see when I'm low on grains. So as I was mentioning before, the baking things are on the top shelf. Then I have a shelf of all kinds of dry beans and lentils. And then I have a shelf of grains. So it may be oats, it may be quinoa, it may be farro, it may be barley, but I have grains on that shelf. And then mixed in, I'll have some seeds and some nuts. And if I buy anything in bulk, like sometimes I might buy nutritional yeast in bulk, then I'll put that in jars, and that'll be on my pantry shelf as well. So this is easy for me. This is what works for me. You might like something totally different. And I do have a lot of room. I have a pantry that the door opens up and there's several shelves, and so I have a lot of space. I know that sometimes people are limited on space, and just keeping things in the containers and not trying to put it in jars would work for you. And I also do cooking classes, so I do have to have a lot of things in bulk, and so my situation might be different than yours, but you certainly could use just smaller jars and not go with the great big jars like I have. That might work for you. But anyway, just thought I'd mention it to you just in case it would be something that would be of interest to you. So yeah, give it a try if you haven't, and just be patient with yourself, because as you begin to eat plant-based and your kitchen begins to morph, you'll figure out what works best for you, and maybe glass jars will work for you. So I want to share that with you today. I hope that you're well stocked in your kitchen, and I hope that you're trying really hard to take good care of your body, because we all know there's power in our plate, and what we eat really does make a difference. See you guys next time.